Hello, and welcome back to the final episode, our season finale of season 5 of the Empowered Modern Witches show. And I have a really special episode for you today. We're going to be digging into everything you need to know about green witchery and natural magic to celebrate the release of my newest book, my third book, which is called Botanical Cocktails. It's a really great companion to my last book, The Modern Witch's Guide to Natural Magic, and really delves into a new fun layer of ways that you can work with plants in your real life as well as in your spiritual practice. So in this episode, we're going to talk about what is green witchcraft and herbalism, why feeling connected to nature is so powerful. I'm going to tell you about a few different ways that you can work with plants, practically actionable things you can do. And I'm going to share some great resources and books and things that I love that I think you should really check out if this is a topic that you're interested in. So first, to introduce the new book, Botanical Cocktails is really a recipe book. It's a little bit shorter than my other books. And theoretically, it's not as explicitly witchy, but as I said, it's a great companion to natural magic. So if you want to learn more about the really spiritual approach to herbalism, check out the Natural Magic book. I really go deep into working with plants in alignment with the seasons and the moon and the zodiac and all of that good stuff. In Botanical Cocktails, we're focusing really more specifically just on the seasons. And I'm sharing 50 garden to glass cocktail recipes with you for every season so you can really move throughout the year and align your celebrations with the earth. And every recipe has a mocktail variation. So no matter what your preferences are, you can really enjoy this book. And like my other books, it is a beautiful hardcover, full color, gorgeous images inside. So it's a fun read. So why botanicals, why herbalism, why green witchcraft, why natural magic, etc. So this is something that is a really core, I would say very innate part of my practice. And so it's really an honor to get to bring it to you guys and share it with you, because I think that working with the seasons originally, like I've talked many times, we have 8 whole episodes digging into each of the seasonal festivals and the pagan wheel of the year. Working with the seasons is really what brought me to my practice in the first place, right? This calling to work with the shifts and the flow of nature throughout the year. Even as a kid, this was something that I was really drawn to. And as I developed my practice further and I started working with some of the more cosmic cycles, the moon phases, and astrology, the movement of the planets, I discovered that sometimes these things can feel really abstract, right? And I've done a few different episodes on this. We'll try to find some of the best ones for you and link them in the show notes if you want to go deeper with this topic. But I just really found that as much as I loved the moon, especially, and as much as I adore astrology and have, over those years become a professional astrologer myself, I found that they can be really abstract. And when something is really abstract, it can feel really outside of ourselves, right? And plants, as well as other, natural tools like crystals, but plants especially, can really help us to bring the cosmic and even the seasonal energy down to earth, help us really embody it, feel it in ourselves, whether we are, actually consuming the plants as food or as tea, or even if we're just observing the seasonal changes in nature, right? These things can be very deeply grounding and really, really supportive. And so that's why green witchcraft, although I consider myself a cottage witch, not necessarily a green witch, green magic and herbalism is very tied up in that path for me and in my own practice. So there are many, many different types of green witchcraft, many different ways to practice herbalism. And you have to really find the way that's right for you, because similar to astrology, really, this is a topic that can feel very, very, very overwhelming, right? It can feel very daunting to try to learn everything there is to know about herbalism. Spoiler alert, you are not going to learn everything there is to know about herbalism. I know professional herbalists who have been working in this field for years, decades, who would not say they feel that they know everything there is to know, just as many astrologers would say the same thing, right? So this very big, very daunting topic can feel like there's this barrier to entry, right? When in reality, working with plants is one of the most natural, most human things that we do. And so you really have to find, what is your way of working with plants? Why are you interested in working with plants? This is an interesting conversation I've been having with myself recently, about a lot of different things in my practice and in my personal life, of like, why do I like the things that I like, right? Why am I called to certain practices or activities? How do they make me feel, right? Rather than just thinking like, well, that's just who I am. Like I'm a cottage witch. Like that's true. That is just who I am. But why, right? Why are those the practices and activities that really nourish me and ground me? And I would really encourage you to do this in lots of different areas of your life. It can be very enlightening, but also really dig into this in your practice. And if you're interested in herbalism, digging into it there. Because there are many different ways that you can work with plants, not just the practical, actionable, what type of herbalism are you practicing, but many different approaches, many different perspectives, right? Some people have more of an animist approach to herbalism. Some people have a very deeply spiritual approach. Some people have a very medicinal approach to herbalism. Why are you wanting to work with plants? This is a great question. And you do not have to have a full and complete answer before you start working with plants by any means. In fact, you will probably never have a full and complete answer, because that is just the nature of it, right? It's always going to be evolving. But that is really why feeling connected to nature is so powerful, because nature is the thing around us that evolves and shifts and transforms and goes through cycles most obviously. And it gives us so much incredible permission to be in those cycles and shifts and evolutions for ourselves as well. So let's get into a little bit of the practical. What are some different ways that you can work with plants? Because sometimes we feel like, okay, I know I want to work with plants. I'm really curious about green witchcraft. I know I want to feel grounded and connected to nature, but how, right? Not only is it a long list of possibilities that can, again, feel really daunting, but it can also feel like we have all these limitations, right? Maybe you live in the city or you live in the suburbs, or you just don't have a lot of time, right, to go through these really elaborate, complex processes, right? So whether it's environment or time, or something else, there can feel like there are a lot of barriers, right? And the reality is that working with plants can be incredibly simple. And in fact, it's very likely that you're working with plants in some ways in your life already. So, for example, one of my absolute favorite ways, and you're going to be like, this is stupid simple. It is stupid simple. And that's the beauty of it. One of my absolute favorite ways to work with plants is not necessarily working with them in an herbal capacity, but actually just having an awareness of nature. So I commuted for years. I don't really anymore. It's only about 10 minutes to my office now, but I commuted, an hour or two or three every single day for years. And I drove the same roads over and over and over again. Maybe you relate to this. Maybe you do that too. And even if you don't necessarily commute, even now it's a short drive, but I do still drive the same roads every day. And really noticing what is growing on the sides of the road, right? What is showing up? What is shifting? What is different than it was last year, right? I love to take pictures of like my backyard and see, year over year, what's different? When did things bloom a little bit differently? The hydrangea in our yard bloomed like 2 weeks earlier than it did last year because it's been a lot warmer this year. And that I think is a really profound way to have a very local and very grounded relationship with the earth and with the plants that grow in your local area. Noticing not only year over year what's different, but also just noticing the slight subtle shifts, right? Noticing when the leaves start to pop out in the spring on the tree outside your office, or, when they slowly start to turn bright orange in the fall. Just really having that awareness. I think that is really one of the most powerful ways you can work with plants. But of course, there's also lots of ways that we can work with plants more tangibly as well, and in more of the context of what we would consider to be herbalism. So some of my favorite ways, and you will know these from my books, are to work with teas or essential oils or other beverages like cocktails and mocktails. I love beverages in particular, these herbal blends that we can create, again, whether they're tea or something else, because we do get to consume them, right? We get to have this really intimate, very personal relationship with that plant. So I think that that can be a really nourishing way to work with plants, right? And obviously we can do this in a very healing, medicinal kind of capacity. We can also do this in a very spiritual capacity, right? Working with the magical correspondences, not just the physical healing properties of the plants. Both of those sets of properties can be very, very healing and important in different ways. And in my last book, The Modern Witch's Guide to Natural Magic, I do really go into how to make your own tea blends, how to have a tea ritual and go through that process and have this really mindful moment that, could be a whole ceremony, but also doesn't really need to take longer than a few minutes, and can really fit right into your day. You're probably already making a cup of tea or a cup of coffee in the morning. Why not just really do that in a spiritual, ritualized way? Obviously, in the new book, we're taking this very similar approach to cocktails and mocktails, which is not necessarily tea, but a very similar process, right? Where we are blending herbs or flowers or fruits or other botanical elements, with other liquids and, mixers in this case, because we're talking cocktails. And of course, in the case of cocktails, the vast majority, I believe probably all, of our alcohols that we might be mixing with are also derived from plants, whether it's a liqueur or a fermented beverage of some kind. They're all coming from plants, right? They're coming from grains or potatoes or whatever we're pulling them from, right? It's a very human thing to make these kinds of beverages. But as I said, there's also a mocktail variation for every single recipe in the book, where you are, mixing with things like sparkling water or tonic water or juices and things like that. Of course, which much of them are also very natural as well. So this process of blending and combining ingredients, I think, is inherently very magical, right? It's our version of making potions. And they can have so many different purposes, right? We can work with the healing properties. We can work with the magical properties. We can also really work with the celebration that these plants represent, which is why I wanted to present the new book, in a seasonal format. Of course, that's how the Natural Magick book is presented as well. So they really do complement one another. But I also thought it was important to align these types of beverages, cocktails and mocktails, with the seasons as well, because that is how we tend to enjoy them, right? We tend to drink certain types of drinks at certain times of the year. When I was first working on the proposal for this book, and I was like, it would be really weird to drink a hot by the pool, right? Maybe that's what you like, maybe that's what you feel called to, but I think for most of us, we're probably going to opt for a Paloma or a margarita, right? And so the book is laid out very seasonally, because I think that that is in many ways how we experience plants, how we experience the earth is through these seasonal shifts. Now, of course, a few other ways to work with plants besides blending and making your own beverages. One would be to work with essential oils. There are a lot of essential oil recipes in the Natural Magick book as well, whether they are anointing oils to put on the body, or on magical objects, diffuser blends that you can diffuse into your space, or even making things like bath salts and potpourri and things like that, where you can engage with the oils and the plants that they're derived from in a different way. Another way that I think is really powerful to work with plants that often gets overlooked because it is not so tangible by its very nature, but is to work with plants and herbs and flowers as spirit guides. So this is a really great alternative, an option to work with plants that you don't have the ability to work with directly. So, for example, if you have an allergy to something, but you really want to work with its magical properties, or if you, for me, that is chamomile, or if you have you just don't have physical access to the plant, right? It's something rare, or it doesn't grow in your area, or it's out of season. But again, you feel really called to work with its magical properties. So there's lots of reasons why you might want to work with plants in this way, maybe even plants that are poisonous, that it wouldn't be safe to work with in a physical way, but you know that that plant's spirit still has some kind of wisdom for you. Lots of different ways, or lots of different reasons rather, why you might want to do this. But also, even if you have physical access to the plant and it is sitting in front of you, you can also work with it in this spirit guide way. And basically, the idea of working with a plant as a spirit guide is really no different from working with a god or goddess or ancestor or any other type of spirit guide, right? We connect with the plants in the spirit realm and ask them for their wisdom, their support, their protection. We might make altars to them, or, tend to them in our yard. Go and visit them at the botanical gardens, right? We develop a relationship tangibly and or in the spirit realm with these plants. So those are definitely some of my absolute favorite ways to work with plants. Another piece of this sort of puzzle of the way that I approach green witchery and herbalism and natural magic is through correspondences. So this kind of big fancy word, correspondences, really just means the magical properties that correspond to a particular plant. And you will find lists of correspondences all over the internet. You will find them in lots of different books. I have a few favorites of my own. And correspondences can be one of those things that are very, very abstract and tend to not have a lot of sources and not be explained very well. And so I kind of took this upon myself a couple of years ago to be like, this drives me crazy. Why don't we talk about where these properties come from? And very often, not exclusively, but very often, the at least baseline of the correspondences for especially plants that have a long history of properties, tends to come from the elements. So I believe we might even have a podcast episode that goes more deeply into this. I'm going to try to find it. I've been recording this. I'm like, there's so many episodes I could link in the show notes. So we'll see which ones I can find. But basically the idea here is that when we boil the universe down to the four elements of fire, earth, air, and water, these represent really everything in our reality, including plants. Now, of course, all plants come from the earth. So we would think, aren't all plants the earth element? In some way, yes, you can absolutely work with any plant to represent the earth. But when we actually think about the individual elements, there are different properties, physical properties of each plant that give us a clue as to which element they're actually associated with most. So as a quick reference here, so fire plants tend to be those that are spiky or spicy or hot in some way. So think cactus, nettle, chili pepper, etc. Earth plants that are specifically associated with the earth, tend to be those that are roots. We mostly work with their roots, or they grow underground in some way, so like roots and tubers, etc. Air plants are some of the most common. We tend to associate really fragrant plants with the air element. So things like mint and lavender, right? Things that are, the scent of them comes to us on the breeze. We also associate the element of air with plants that really are very soft and bend and flow in the breeze versus breaking, right? So things like grasses versus a big oak tree. And then lastly, water plants tend to be those that either have a very high water content themselves, so things like aloe, or that grow in water, such as seaweed or lotuses, or those that are really associated with the emotional body. So we often associate like roses with the water element, even though they're very fragrant, right? So we might go to air, but they're often associated with water because they are so very soothing and comforting, right? So that one's a little bit more abstract. And of course, there are many ways that plants might overlap and have more than one of these elements and the expressions of those elements present. But this is a really good rule of thumb. And the thing that I love about this is that if you can figure out the most likely element of a plant without even looking in your favorite correspondence book, if you can figure out the element, that is going to tell you most likely the zodiac sign and planet that it's associated with as well. So for example, if you figure out, okay, it's definitely a fire plant, then that means that it is ruled by either Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, right? The 3 fire signs of the zodiac. Aries plants tend to be the really intensely like spiky, spicy ones. Leo plants tend to be those, because Leo rules the sun, or is ruled by the sun rather. They tend to be those that are very solar in nature, right? Sunflowers and calendula, right? Things that represent the sun. And then Sagittarius plants actually most often tend to be those that are spicy but warming. So not necessarily spice in the sense of like cayenne or chili, which we would associate with Aries, but rather things like cinnamon. Well, cinnamon is kind of goes across the board. That's a bad example. But things like nutmeg or clove, right, that are very warming, more subtle than some of the other spices. And so if you can get to the element, you can most likely figure out the most likely zodiac sign, which is also going to give you a planet, because every sign is ruled by a planet, right? And so this can be really, really powerful information to have, because just that alone, you're getting an element, a astrological sign, and a planet. And this is going to lead you down a path, right? Of, okay, well, if it's associated with Leo and with the sun, then, sunflowers are probably associated with joy and happiness. And in fact, yes, of course they are. So I think that really digging into correspondences was a huge part of my journey in really starting to practice herbalism more, and to, find these really easy, accessible ways to bring natural magic into my life and into my practice, because it really helped me to feel that I had a more personal relationship, right? Rather than just turning to my Cunningham's encyclopedia, which of course I still do, but rather than just going straight there and looking up, okay, well, what does the book say that this is all about? It's a much more intuitive process, and a much more, I think, grounded and informed process that can be very empowering, right? Rather than just needing to turn to the book to tell us what we're looking at, we can really turn within first and then turn to the book and see what layers the book might add, right? So those are definitely a major overview of the favorite ways for me to practice green witchery. I wanted to just recommend a few resources to add to your green witch library. So a few of the most favorite books that you probably already have on your shelf, but that tend to be recommended in these kinds of lists, are Green Witchcraft by Paige Vanderbeck and The Green Witch by Erin Murphy Hiscock. These are great books. They're a really great intro, a great overview. My favorite books or actually probably one of my absolute favorite books, period, are on green witchery, is actually called now I'm going to get the name wrong. Mixing Oils for Magic. I'll have to look it up. I will get the link correct for you guys. But it is my favorite correspondence book, because I think it does have a really great approach to sharing more specific correspondences, right? Not just love and fertility and power, but digging a little deeper and getting some really beautiful layers, and helping us to find plants that will support us in more specific contexts. So that is one of my favorites. My books, of course, do really go into natural magic, particularly The Modern Witch's Guide to Natural Magic and the new book, Botanical Cocktails. I also highly recommend the Herbal Astrology Oracle. It is a beautiful, beautiful deck, and really ties some of the correspondences together very beautifully, tying plants to planets. And the artwork is absolutely stunning. So a few great resources there for you. And before we wrap up, I would love to invite you to join me for the free Modern Green Witches Summit. It's happening July 10th to 11th, 2024. In celebration of my new book, we're going to have 2 full days of live and recorded sessions. I will be presenting on the Botanical Cocktails framework, as well as more on this concept of seasonal correspondences, and going deeper into how we can work with certain plants at certain times of the year. We're also going to be having some of your favorite witches and herbalists on to talk about their unique approaches to natural magic and easy ways that you can practice green witchcraft. So we're going to be having topics all across the board. We're going to be bringing in the astrology. We're going to be talking about some practical things you can do, like magical baths and making poppets. We're going to be talking about different types of plants you might want to work with. It's going to be so much fun. It's completely free to join us. The link for that is in the show notes. And if you have a free ticket to the summit, you have through July 13th to catch up on the replays. So you'll have a couple of days afterwards. When you sign up for your free ticket, you will also have the opportunity to upgrade. And if you upgrade your ticket, you're going to get over $700 in bonus resources from all of our speakers. So there are courses and workbooks in there to help you really implement what you learn and carry your new herbalism practice into your life. So come and join us for the summit. Pick up a copy of my new book, Botanical Cocktails, and I can't wait to see you there.